it's clear that races can be won or lost in the mind.
I do believe that if you're pushed, it's the time when you give your best.
Athletes have experienced it, racing drivers have experienced it in the car, where you're sort of not thinking, you're just doing.
Driving is a very, very demanding cognitive process.
There's distractions at the racetrack, everything that tries to get in the way, and you've got to be able to somehow separate yourself from that.
We believe the next frontier in performance is the mind.
We discuss science and its relevance to motorsports frequently in the community. There's so much theory crafting and learning to be done because force is an abstract concept. Defined in physics as any interaction that will change the motion of an object when unopposed. Measurements that stand out are measurements of horsepower and torque, two of the most important numbers anyone would want to guess when they're about to face off at shift sector. The power produced by an engine is called its horsepower. Torque is the expression of a rotational or twisting force. For race cars, horsepower means speed. That torque part, though, that's the thing that pushes you back in the seat and takes your breath away. Torque is more of representative of the strength of an engine. The relationship or distinctions between these two might be obvious to car people, but for the average individual, it's simply just the car goes. Intertwined, these two result in the rate at which a car is going to haul ass down a track. However, as much as we can predict what might happen according to science in any given race, I'll go back to a reminder that force is still an abstract concept, making predictions slightly more tricky. Other factors involved include aerodynamics and downforce and drag, but perhaps driver mod still matters most of all.
I think it's a given for people who understand how the mind works, that how we think directly influences how we perform.
Focus and concentration is everything. I mean, that's basically where you need to be in the car. You need to be focused on the right things at the right times, and anytime that focus or that concentration is diminished is when mistakes happen.
You know, without it, you find yourself in the tires or in the gravel or off the track. You know, it's one of those things that as a driver you develop. You normally have like a natural skill to be able to just concentrate on one task in hand. But then at the same time, as you keep learning, you're able to just kind of let yourself go on autopilot.
You have to sustain it. That's the hard part, is you know, for these 2.5, 3 hour races, you have to not let it slip at all. I mean, you can't afford it at this speed.
And obviously you want to extract the best out of the race car, so the grip that you get from the tires is what you feel, and concentration is what's going to give you those feelings, those feedbacks. And the more focused you are, the more precise you can be.
This is where we circle back to neuroscience and racing and just how much might be happening inside the brain in quite a short amount of time. The drivers are flying low down this runway. Since the brain is dependent upon stimulus information from the senses, that input is most of what's available to process in a situation and create micro-decisions while executing a race. But also included was the existing knowledge from the racer's past experience. It's perhaps why many may refer to this as instincts. Visual speed is a completely separate process than how a driver decides what to do with that visual information, and it happens in a separate region of the brain that must coordinate in order to save one's tuchus from sudden wreckage or launch within fractions of a second. Light passes through the eye and travels down the optic nerve before reaching the occipital lobes located at the back of the brain. This is where our minds attempt to translate reality for us back into an image, and although it seems like a simple mechanism, it involves complex processing in the brain as a human reconstructs a version of the world inside their own head. Because of this, we may not be seeing a direct translation, but rather our own interpretation, and this can lead to errors in perspective. No light, no prep either, all conditions which have been calculated into the equation to get from point A to point B intact in one piece. This is where the work of cognitive ability comes in, defined as the time that it takes a human to do a mental task. It's relational to the speed at which a human can understand and react to the task. Hands falling means go. One might wonder if this factor is related to intelligence, but the two are not actually interrelated. A high IQ would not predict faster processing, but rather cognitive ability affects the speed of completion. This adaptive skill can become the hinge point for a race no matter what horsepower and torque numbers govern the cars involved. This interpretation for speed is laying the groundwork for what physical sets of muscles will be enacted in order to achieve a launch or shift. All of this is happening within a split second inside the brain, as different regions chain together in this kind of responses that we rarely break down into its quite complicated process. From here, the nervous system is transponding its signal by way of motor unit, which transmits an activation signal and transforms it into what's called contractile activity. Contractile properties of muscles comprise of its force capacity, strength, and power. The rate at which it can develop force, which is contractile speed, is much like the concepts behind power generation in cars for horsepower and torque.
Fundamental prerequisite to getting in the zone is the ability to focus in the moment on the task in front of you to the exclusion of everything else that in that moment becomes a distractor.
No, there is a zone. There is definitely a zone. And what it is, I think it's a point where it's such completely pure focus on what you're doing and everything in the driving. It's almost like you feel sometimes, when I've done a qualifying lap sometimes, and I think, well, I don't know if it was any good, and I'll get on the radio and say, I'm not sure if that was a good lap, and they go, you're on pole.
Yeah, I mean, when you're in the zone, it's, you know, it's typically when things are working good and you're hitting your marks and the car's doing what you want it to do, and you know, you're able to knock down good lap times and very consistent.
Every now and then, you know, you get in the car and you make one with the car. The car does just about everything you ask it to do, and there's no surprises, no bad things coming your way. It just flows and goes through one lap after another, and that's a very special moment. It doesn't happen every weekend. Sometimes you're lucky when you have it once a year, but you know, the more it happens, usually the better, because that's when you're really on the money and you make things happen.
At the beginning of a racing career, it just happens, and you don't know why. And then once you understand, you try to recreate it, try to make it happen as often as possible, because that means good results. It's a very special thing. It feels like you're flying above the racetrack, that the car is doing everything that you need all of a sudden, and you're just going faster than anyone.
To be honest with you, to be good at this, you gotta be in the zone every day. You know what I mean, when you drive the car, it's not, I always tell people, if you gotta make an effort to do it, you shouldn't be doing it.
Because you blew a corner, you're thinking about the corner you just messed up. What's likely to occur in the next corner? The likelihood is you're going to mess that corner up as well. Why? Well, the truth is, physically I'm right here in this next corner, but mentally I'm actually back in the last corner thinking about what I did to mess it up.
You know, you have to recover from it pretty quick, and experience helps a lot with that, from recovering from mistakes. You have to get back into your race rhythm as quickly as possible. That's crucial, because every second, every half second, every tenth lost could be the difference at the end of the race. So recovering from mistakes is a tough one, and you certainly get better with experience at it, but you have to build up a certain mentality that everything has to be put behind you.
You know, if you get spun around and just have to, you know, recover and make the best of the day, you do. You know, it's every time you have a setback, and we've had, you know, one in St. Pete with KVSH. You know, we got a drive-through, we got, you know, sent to the back, and you know, you still, it's 20 laps left, and you just try and pass as many cars as you can, and get the best result for yourself and for the team. That's what it's all about.
Yeah, it's usually a big disappointment, especially if you're in the lead and everything's going well, but you have to rebound from it. So you always have to believe. You know, you're racing, you're last, everything's going wrong, but you have to believe that it's going to come back. And the fact that you believe in it just puts you in the right mood, and concentration is back at 100%.
I've never been one that gets too frustrated with anything. I've always been pretty calm, and just being able to just instantly forget just what happened and just get on with it. Because I think if you always think about, oh, crap, you know, that's happened, and you know, I think you talk yourself out of some opportunities. So I think you just gotta just forget it. Just move on and just do as much as you can. Because at the end of the day, if you come out of the car and you know you're given 100%, that's all you could have done.
I have the mentality of just, never give up. If I'm 2 laps down, all right, how do we get 1 lap down? If I'm 1 lap down, how do we get on the lead lap? And then if you're in the back, how do you get to the front? These races are long enough. Even though they're somewhat sprint races, they're long enough that you can recover. And if you have a good car and great pit crew like we do, you never give up, regardless of the circumstance.
And you always got to push as hard as you can, and you always got to drive the wheels out of the car. It's the only way to get to the top of this is to be better than everybody else, and the only way to be better than everybody else is just work harder.
So what does it mean to be fast? In the chain of what happens from watching the hands fall to moving one's foot to the accelerator, there are links that are also trainable skills, since perception isn't a fixed ability. It's something that can be highly impacted by even a temporary frame of mind. Instincts can be broken down into the categories of genetic memory that come pre-installed at birth, versus those which can be managed by emotional resilience over time. The difference here can be illustrated in the common evolutionary fear of spiders as a trait that comes natural to many, while some phobias can be attached to previous negative experiences, such as developing a fear of dogs after being bitten. The latter is conditioned. Others can have more nuanced thoughts attached to them, like the fear of tests after several failures. In driver development, the point is teaching conditioned responses to potentially dangerous situations that will avoid wrecks while accounting for the situational factors involving speed and force in those precious split seconds. This is not an innate skill in humans, but one that's concreted over a lifetime of how the individual handles general life circumstances, their emotions, and thought processes, and that's going to determine how fast they can go.
We knew that race car drivers are specially trained. They go through their racing with lots of concentration, but we didn't know exactly where we could actually see this in the brain, or to what extent mental preparation plays a role in success. How focused do you feel right now? Do you sleep well? Do you feel stressed? Distracted? Are you ready to make a split-second decision? Are you sure? For the first time, Ford has used an EEG on drivers to read the electrical signals from the brain. It showed us how professional drivers and everyday people perform under pressure in a racing simulator, both before and after mental preparation. So we focused in on a few different techniques that racing drivers use to get in the zone. So one of them was like a breathing meditation and a visualization technique using keywords to describe the track ahead.
The same brain areas are used during mental performance as they are with physical performance. The experiment is actually quite exceptional, using expert drivers, which is a population that researchers don't often have access to, and using also control group of normal drivers.
What we actually find is fascinating.
There's this ability of a race car driver to be always on. They're switched in, they're using the maximum of their capacity to the task at hand.
We were able to witness just how differently the brains function compared to members of the public. Traveling at high speed in a state of high focus, the brains perform up to 40% better than you or I.
The interesting thing we found was that if we had normal people doing some mental exercise, they also could reach this higher performance.
In fact, compared to the control group, we saw up to 50% improvement in performance.
It's clear that races can be won or lost in the mind. Through this groundbreaking technology, we now have the ability to work with a whole new set of metrics. These findings have the potential to be applied to people everywhere, and we're just scratching the surface.
like shift sector provide a unique context for testing human limits of speed. The competition here is pretty friendly and the mood quite casual. There really isn't anything much around for miles as this event takes place in Coalinga, California. Never heard of it, right? Exactly. This is a small but functional airport and has been commandeered by clever event planners to create a scene straight out of Forza Horizon. And while it may seem once in a lifetime, this magnificent occurrence usually happens a couple times a year here. Racers will usually book accommodations at the historical Harris Ranch, which is the only luxury suites found in a close proximity, while offering up some of the best barbecue in California to round out the experience. Poolside relaxation available if needed. It's got that cars and coffee vibe around the grid. Everyone's just sort of wandering around, checking out the cars and chatting with each other in this new awkward socially distanced fashion. Friends, family, and crews were limited, but it still was vibrant and bustling paddock filled with the flashiest of cars. Treadlife has attended this event year after year, and this weekend felt like a step back in time, as if nothing had changed in the ever-changing world around us. If this was a shared feeling, then this little bubble of bliss is a welcome relief from the week's stressors. In attendance was BBI Autosport with the 997 GT2 putting out 1,430 wheel horsepower and a McLaren 675 LT at 950, which would go on to break a record in the half mile for the McLaren 3.8 liter with 187 miles an hour. Head-to-head or some trap speed action, this is a great way for you to see what your car can do, even if you might not think that you're in record territory yet. There are some wonderful folks at the companies involved around that will walk you through how to get to those numbers that can be achieved on your vehicle. Kodak wraps provide the built-in rally lineup with beautifully done highlighter vinyl, and can't forget to include the awesome folks at Gintani for sponsoring this event for everyone to enjoy. After a short trip down the taxiway, we arrived at cars already getting locked into their lanes before takeoff in this sort of street racer, no prep style down the runway with a number of conditions to take into consideration from surface to temperature and wind speeds. It's rarely considered but jumbled amongst those instincts referenced earlier. The perception was that hours were passing faster than usual, even though we know they're in the same measurement. It's fun and excitement that was accelerating time. Hours can fly by while some seconds tick down with agonizing length. If you've ever experienced this phenomenon, then you realize the power perception has over your experience in life, or that your experience won't exactly match that of somebody else's. What you process will determine how fast you can go, from seeing the hands fall to getting your foot to that pedal.